Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. Right off the top, we have breaking news today. The AAF, the Football League we've been talking about the past couple weeks, just wrapped up its 8th week. Orlando, the Orlando Apollos is the full team name. They are in first in the league with a 7-1 record, but today the league stopped business. Right in the middle, they announced that they don't have the funds, or at least the investor isn't going to pay the funds to finish the league, which is a disappointment to me because I thought he put up $250 million to finish out the season. They said that his loss right now is at $70 million, so he didn't reach his full investment yet. And I can get into some of the politics stuff, but I want to get your thought on it, Matt. What do you think?
It kind of brings up some of the stuff that I was concerned about in the get-go, that the AAF was trying to be the one to finish first in the race versus the XFL, and instead of putting the focus on being able to consistently put a good product out, they wanted to just have something out to kind of take the edge off, and it looks like they put the cart ahead of the horse. They didn't have the financial backing, and it just kind of blew up on them is what it looks like to me.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a couple rumors flying around. I first point to the initial owners, which was that Ebersol guy, and I can't remember. It was like the one of the TV network guys and the guy that did 30 for 30. Their names are escaping me. But they came out strong saying that they had the investment when in reality they didn't. It looks like the rumors were true that they only had enough money invested to pay for the first 2 weeks of the league. And they're on major networks. You would think that they would take that money and pump it right back into the player salaries. That seems to be the holdup. Right now, it looks like, and he's the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes right now, Dunning, I think is his last name. He's the one that did the investment, came in, and he's been trying to strong arm the NFLPA into getting NFL owners to pay the salaries for this league. He wants it as a minor league for the NFL, sort of like what minor league baseball does for the MLB. The MLB teams own minor league teams, basically the salaries, and then they have rights to those players. But let's be real, it's not going to work when you only have 8 teams. The MLB works because you have 3 or 4 teams per major league franchise. So you can pick and choose different levels. You can send a guy down for rehab. You can do that. The NFL already has practice squads. So to me, that was my concern. A lot of people loved this league in comparison to the XFL, where I feel like the XFL, they had one go round at it. They already have enough money up front. They know what it takes. I believe they finished their season. I know they had the championship game.
Yes. Tommy Maddox won it.
Yeah, and then he went to the Steelers. So it was almost like a feeder league when that is what they need. They approached it wrong. They tried to get diehard NFL fans that were shunned from the league. I talked to a Pittsburgh Steelers season ticket holder over the weekend, and he says that there's still some resentment for the way the NFL handled some of those issues in the past, and season ticket sales are down so far. So you're looking at that from the NFL. People wanted an escape, and so they tried to play into the NFL's hands by making their league as much like the NFL as possible. And I think they should have went, I've said it all along, with more of a mix of college style as a way for NFL coaches and younger talent to experiment, maybe because there's how many players every year from the college level that are excellent in college, and you hear about it. He doesn't fit the NFL prototype. So there's nowhere for them to go. They go to what? The Arena Football League and are never heard from again because the rules are too different. I think they had a great opportunity here, and a couple coaches, Carolina Panthers' Ron Rivera came out. He was in favor of the league because he said, and I think the offensive defensive line are his strength, I could be wrong, but he said that a lot of programs in college, linemen aren't taught the right techniques that they need in the NFL. And we know once they get in the NFL, you learn those techniques, you can play for any team. It's plug and play. This would have been a great chance to develop techniques but still play around with different offenses, spread, tempo, and things like that. But they just didn't get it done. And it's disappointing to me. But what do you think the next steps are? Do you think there's any chance that they finish this season?
I think there's a mild chance that they'll finish. To me, the thing that was surprising is they based the league out of all these southern or warmer weather states trying to pull, and the attendance records just looked absolutely horrific. They would show a lot of those games, and there'd be no one in the stands. So, I mean, it had to have either been people like us watching from home because they weren't bringing people to the stadium, and I think that was something that really hurt them. I don't know what their marketing strategies were with the stadiums, but it definitely wasn't drawing the local fans to the stadium.
I think that it depended on the team. Now, they weren't sellouts by any means, but I think Orlando, Birmingham, and maybe the Texas teams, including maybe San Diego, I think they all had solid attendance around at least NBA type numbers, which is around like 20,000 or so. Which
Real.
That's what I saw. I think I saw Orlando was in first with around 30 to 40. And again, those might just be tickets sold, just like we talked about with Missouri football a couple weeks ago. But I think those were the highest. And then, of course, you had Salt Lake City that had snow. That one game, you could count the fans. It was like 10. And I think that's where you're getting up into, okay, you picked a semi-northern team. You knew Salt Lake City was going to be cold, but they don't have a dome. So, yeah, they needed to pick the southern teams. And I think they could have really done well by trying to play on college campuses. Like, why not? And maybe there's a conflict of interest, but I think a lot of those college stadiums, they're not used. They're taxpayer funded for the most part. Now, donor funded, you could argue at some of the bigger schools, but play at a smaller school. I mean, I guess the smaller schools might not have the TV network capabilities that they needed from CBS or whatever networks, but you already have a young fan base in college towns that are looking for something to do. Now, it's not that cold out right now. You could have went and sat in the game. It's been 70s down here in the South. So they could have worked on a couple different things. I think they started the league too early too. And I want to get your thoughts on this. I feel like if they had waited a month or two, closer to April, and they ran it alongside, maybe even started it the week after spring football, because let people get their appetite wet. You just had a great Super Bowl, and you're playing the next weekend. Then, of course, the first things we noticed was like, wow, look how bad these guys are. They're dropping every pass. There's how many fumbles. You can't go right from the Super Bowl, the best of the best, to the AAF, a startup league. You just can't. I think if they would have waited till closer to the NFL draft and spring football so that people were excited for football again and then they were hungry for that content, like right after maybe March Madness. I think the final game's next Tuesday. Start this Friday. What do you think about that?
I think their timing was right, because I think if you push it further, then you're going to start running into NHL playoffs and NBA playoffs. So plus with where they are right now with their season, they're pushing close to the NFL draft and mini camps. So I think it would have interfered with more of the NFL type stuff that starts to pick back up. I thought the time slot was right, and plus you wanted that momentum from the Super Bowl to say, hey, here's the peak of the league. Here's this upstart league the following week. I think maybe the issue that they had was that there wasn't enough prep. Like, it definitely looked like I felt like the first 2 weeks of the season reminded me of what preseason football games are like, and how we talk about how they look raw and the players are rough. I mean, that's what it looked like. It was developmental, that you don't see those top tier talent, and it just goes to show you what those first string and second string players really are capable of. Because once you get down the depth chart, the AAF is a prime example of what happens when you're playing with third and fourth string guys.
Yeah, I just looked at the schedule, and I think that they lined it up around to have the championship either NFL draft weekend or the weekend after. So I guess it makes sense from a timing standpoint. But I think you could be right. Just take a week off. Shorten the season a bit. Like, what if you still ended around the same NFL draft? People aren't going to sit around. I mean, you're sitting around listening to the NFL draft. Most people follow on their phones. But what if you were watching and you had your computer up with the NFL draft picks while you're watching the AAF championship game? Like, that would have really bit right into the NFL. And maybe that's what they tried to line it up with. I don't know. But I think that could have worked. But just why 10 games? You only have 8 teams. Let's say you play every other team once. That's 7. And then you pick a close rival to play twice and have an 8-game schedule. Why the unbalanced 10? Like, some of it just doesn't make sense to me. They could have played it more to like the college football type strength. And I understand what they're trying to do. Have like a mini playoff. We'll see. I would love to see them finish that because it can't be that much more if you're only paying the playoff teams. But I would imagine they have a salary bump for teams that make the playoffs, and maybe that's what they're trying to cut out. But it's disappointing all around because I get to see my man Steve Spurrier. He's robbed. He could have had a championship.
No, he just did what every SEC team would do. He just claimed it.
And he should claim it.
He said, well, we're 7-1, so we win.
He should claim it. Put it up there. And to be honest, if they're not going to give him any trophies, he should get one made himself and display it on. I mean, he ran that one ad. Him and Les Miles did an ad, so they have sponsors. Like, Dos Equis or something. He's sponsored by some beer company. Let him run an ad during like NFL or maybe even spring football for the Florida Gators. Have a trophy celebration at Gators spring game, where he's brought out and they give him a trophy. I would love to see that. What do you think about that?
I'll take a pass.
Too busy watching Florida State and their, what they call it, lethal simplicity?
You don't knock it. We got Kendall Browse now. It's going to be okay.
Well, let's go ahead and shift into the high tempo. I know you have some little stuff, so why don't you get into it?
Yeah, Willie Taggart and company decided not to take a page out of Mish's playbook, and we went ahead and signed a home deal in 2027 and 2028 with Georgia. So nothing like taking a team that's been to the playoffs, played for a national championship recently, and taking the tougher schedule. So I've been a fan of that, even though it does come with some potential drawbacks. They're going for it, and I don't mind it.
Hey, let's not give all the credit to Florida State first off. Georgia also scheduled Clemson, so they're trying to do the regional thing. And I think it's targeted at the SEC and the ACC having only 8 conference games. Georgia's trying to fill that schedule. Not every team does it. I don't think Georgia should be forced into this. They already have the Georgia Tech crossover. I think I saw it was at least one year where on their schedule they're playing 11 Power 5 teams. Similar to what Michigan had lined up. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but they had something similar when you add Notre Dame back in, or maybe it was the year if they count BYU, because a lot of teams counted BYU, so they had BYU, Colorado, and another team on the schedule. So you have that type of schedule. Is it going to hurt you if you lose the games? If you win it, like Notre Dame did, beating Michigan last year, and then Michigan ended up with as a 10-win team, it bumps you up. If you're playing nobodies in college football, it honestly looks like it's better for you. And you can't prove me wrong. I don't see any reason why you should schedule this game. There's none. Because it always comes back to, whether they want to admit it or not, the undefeated season. Because there were still computer algorithms and poll voters that the NCAA recognized that picked UCF for a national championship 2 years ago with their schedule. Because they were undefeated. And there were people ready to clamoring for them to get another one this year. And the schedule didn't get any harder. They didn't schedule any other teams. Whether that's their fault or not is to be determined. But why?
Well, that schedule was already set. It wasn't like they could drastically make last-minute changes to this schedule to try to bump that up. One of the things, it's a devil's advocate. When you look back at the 90s Florida State teams, they were playing Miami every year, which was when they were still in the Big East, and they were playing Florida every year out of conference. They're playing both teams at home, but you never saw Miami and Florida playing those games because they were afraid of knocking each other out of a potential situation where they could play for a championship. And I think it benefited, when you look at that time period, it benefited Florida State because they were definitely battle tested enough that it led to them having the consecutive years of being in the top 5.
But that was also a time where they had to do that because it was almost as bad. You could argue that it was worse than the Big Ten when it was just a Big 2 and the Little 8. Because you had Florida State, Clemson, and who? You didn't have Virginia Tech back then. As you stated, you didn't have Miami yet. You didn't even have Notre Dame in this half weird thing. You had almost 0 football programs with any pedigree. I mean, who did you have that won a national championship? Maybe Maryland in the 50s? Because that was before they went to the Big Ten. Realistically, if you look through the ACC... Georgia Tech around the early 90s, yeah, you're right. They had a national championship right around 1990, I believe. A split one with Colorado, maybe. So, that's it. So, when a Big Ten added Penn State, they went out and made a statement hey, we're bringing in the best program that's available right now. And so, other conferences had to schedule up. And to be fair, a lot of them did that too. And I don't know if this was Florida State, but a lot of them did that to get on television because the rules back then, and maybe in the 90s it was changed by then, but in the 80s and the 70s, you were allowed only 1 or 2 games on television. And they only premiered. It wasn't like now where there's 18 games on a Saturday. There were 3. You had the noon game, the 3:30 game, and the 7 o'clock game. So if you weren't playing big-time opponents, guess what? They weren't showing you. So... You know how it seems like some teams are always on game day, like the Alabamas and even Florida State is on there a bunch. You had to play those big games or they weren't picking up your schedule. And guess what? You didn't get any television money then as a conference or as a team. So it would have put you behind. And that's where I think you saw a lot of high crossover games. If you go back and look at the 90 schedules, of course you had less teams per conference, so you didn't have 9 conference games. But they were almost forced, if they wanted that exposure, to be on TV. Because Florida State, in all reality, they were only, 30 years into a program, 20 years in? They weren't vested. They weren't on TV in the 70s. Let's put it that way. So they almost had to make that jump. So it worked out for them. And the rest of the ACC, we've talked about it on the show, they were focused on basketball. And now it looks like Florida State made the right move. You focus on football, get big at that, and it's easier to build a basketball program. They're in back-to-back Sweet 16s. And then you have, and look at Auburn this year in the Final Four. South Carolina, 2 years ago, we're in the Final Four. It's easier to build a football team and then a basketball team than it is the other way around because Duke and UNC still haven't reached that peak. Kansas, who else? Kentucky. They're struggling to be 8-win football teams. So, Florida State definitely made the right decision there, and so did the ACC with their expansions after the Big Ten expanded by adding Virginia Tech. But it's big. Getting a fair playing ground is going to be a huge decision or decider, I guess, in these next couple college football playoff rankings and polls. Because if you don't get that bump from having a big game, guess what? Teams aren't going to play it. They hear the rumors every year. Some teams don't need the ticket bump. And guess what? Those are your big boys. They don't have to schedule tough interconference games if it's only going to hurt you. So, We'll see what happens. It just hasn't really come down to that. You really think Texas and Oklahoma were scheduling a bunch of Big Ten crossovers? You really think the Oklahoma and Ohio State games that practically kept each other out of the playoffs or were close to keeping each other out of the playoffs are going to get scheduled if that keeps happening? Hell no. Hell no, that's not going to happen. So let's go ahead and get into some hockey off the high tempo here. Penguins playing right now. Of course, I had the score up, but then I got distracted looking up the AAF football thing. So they're playing the night, and I'll see if I can bring it up. But in the meantime, had a great story from Pittsburgh Penguin, Chris Letang. He donated, what was it, $38,000 or $58,000? I don't want to say the wrong number, and of course, this is taking forever to load. Yep, $58,000 to a 7-year-old Somerset boy. He made the trip last Johnstown, who was suffering from cancer. And of course, I go on the worldwide leader, ESPN, to see what they're saying about this, because local Johnstown affiliate WJAC TV number 6 was the first news outlet that I saw report it. And you want to see positive stories like this. But did ESPN pick it up? Not from what I saw. You know what? I click on their thing, and I'm going through NHL. No topics about it. So I'm like, all right, whatever. I wonder what's going on in the college football world, because I saw the same story that you said about Florida State and Georgia scheduling the home and home. I click on college football, Matt. What do you think the top story was?
It'll probably be something about Nick Saban.
Nope.
Alabama football.
Not even about football, Matt. It was about.
Can they fit three SEC teams in the college football playoff?
No, it was about Zion Williamson. What position do you think he could play if he was in college football?
Well, that makes sense, because when I think college football, I think basketball player Zion Williamson. Dumbass.
It is the most ridiculous thing. And you have a great story like this, Chris Letang, helping someone out. They always talk about NHL player. Oh, now that NHL's on ESPN Plus, we're going to really push the sport. We're going to help promote it. You have a great story like this. Put it out there. Why not? No one, I only saw a bunch of local stations pick it up, to be honest. And to me, that broke my heart. Because you have a hockey player, a champion, doing something great, and you just don't give it any news. Like you're talking about all kind of other random, like what ifs and opinion pieces. I feel like.
But I wonder, for every story like that, though, I wonder how many go unchecked. Like that the players are willing to do those kinds of things. And there's no cameraman, there's no nothing. It's just because they have to be being approached by every Tom, Dick, and Harry to say, please help my cause. And, you know, this one did make some news, but I would be surprised to find out how many other causes of players are contributing to. No, not to undermine what Letang did, because it's awesome, but I think there's a lot of players that are probably helping out and doing that kind of stuff without the recognition that they get from the national media.
And you're probably right, but the way that, like, ESPN's built off the AP Newswire, you would think that there's not a lot of hockey news. I looked at their thing. It was like about playoff scenarios potentially. And there's only so many things you can write about until they play tonight's game, because you can't get a clearer picture until after tonight's games are over. There were 3 games remaining, at least in the Eastern Conference, for most of the teams that are in the race: Blue Jackets, Penguins, Hurricanes, and the Montreal, or Canadiens, whatever. That's it. So why not just pick up this AP piece and stick it in the sidebar? If you have that, I mean, you have a whole heading section in college football donated to a basketball player. Like the feature story. Like, why not just do something? And I understand, yeah, maybe he didn't want the publicity, but if it's picked up by one, then it makes the AP Newswire. You would think that the worldwide leader would at least acknowledge it. I mean, if it was fact check enough by WJAC TV, I would assume that it's good to run. So, disappointed in that. But the Penguins right now, they look like to me, I didn't do the math. Let's be honest. Did you do the math? I didn't have it. I looked at NHL. Come on, man. I go to your website and I try to click on the standings to see if they give me how many games are behind, so that I can, like, you know how Major League Baseball has like a wild card counter where you can kind of see which teams are eliminated and how many games they need to win. Like, why doesn't the NHL thing have a points counter for me that I can just do a quick glance and say, oh, here we are. The 97 points. If they win today, that gives them 99. They only need 2 points to clinch. Good. If they win tonight, they're in. Which is how I feel. That's how I felt going in. 2 games against the Red Wings. I feel like if the Penguins win, they're probably in. Hurricanes and the Canadians are battling for that 8th spot at 93 and 94, something like that, with 3 games remaining for each team. So it's looking good. I'd really like to stay in the 6th spot. I think that's the furthest they can move up. Yeah, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, there's 3 teams, or 4 teams battling. There's only 3 spots left. Highest Penguins can get, at least, well, I guess you can go up. It depends if the other teams in front of them lose. But if they can stay around the 5 or 6, I'd be happy. I'd like to get your thoughts, though, Matt. What do you think going into this final stretch?
I feel like every time we talk about it, it's just get in, because unfortunately you still got to play Washington. You still got to either play Columbus or one of the Washingtons. So, the last couple of years I feel like Lundqvist and the Rangers have been a thorn in their side, but now it looks like the Islanders are clinched and they're in already. So it just you're going to have to go through that, and it's just a matter of, do you have enough guys healthy, and are you going to be ready to go come time to play the Caps? Because they're going to be physical.
And the way it's looking like it could line up, I think that could be the first round matchup, but we'll see. If hopefully things don't go that way. But Penguins right now are down 2-1. Hurricanes are up 2-1. Canadians are tied 2-2. And the other one, Blue Jackets, are down 6-2. So I would say that one's over. And they'll drop. They're already behind the Penguins anyway. So they would just fall. They could potentially fall behind the Hurricanes and the Canadians for that 8th spot. So we'll see how it goes. Just get in. I'm a little bit more optimistic now because they can control their destiny a little bit if they win and get the points to jump up to a higher seed, or at least stay at a higher seed. You don't want to play the top teams if you don't have to. So let's see. We'll know next week. I think the final game is on Sunday. So we'll know next week, and we'll be able to do our NHL playoff preview show. So keep an eye on that. Let's get into NCAA basketball talk, the other tournament that's going on. Final Four, Auburn plays Virginia on one side. Texas Tech plays Michigan State on the other. You will have either the Spartans win, I believe it would be their 3rd national championship. If they don't get it done, there's going to be a first-time national champion in college basketball. So I think you're down to some exciting times. I think the Michigan State Spartans beating Duke really opened up the Final Four, just because if you watch some of the Duke games, they're always close at the end. And for whatever reason, because they had Zion Williamson, it always felt like they were going to get the call. Now that they're out, I feel like anything could go here. So what are your thoughts, Matt, on the Final Four? Who do you think gets it done and wins it all?
I have no idea. It's so wide open. I saw the way Duke had flirted with disaster, and it definitely did come back to bite them. I don't know. We were wrong about Purdue making a deeper run than what they did, and maybe it's Virginia's time to step up and take the mantle. I don't know. I feel like every step of the way this tournament we've been wrong. So
I'm looking at the teams now, and normally a team that wins a national championship has the alpha dog that steps up. I looked through some Duke stats. I think only Zion had 1 bucket those 3 games in the last minute or 2 when they were close. That's not an alpha dog stepping up. I saw one of the Duke's guards, maybe he was ball hogging, didn't try to get him the ball. He was 0 for 9 or something crazy like that. That was the guy that they put the game in his hands. He couldn't get it done in any of them, so I don't know why Duke didn't try a different strategy against Michigan State, because it didn't make sense to me. But
Well, it's almost like the strategy to play Duke was just double on Zion, keep the pressure on him, and then force the other guys to make the plays. And through some of the earlier rounds, they were able to make those plays. It just eventually came back to bite them. I think the UCF game was an example of that with Taco. Had he have not gotten in foul trouble, definitely would have sent them home early.
Well, that was going to be my point. Taco fouled out. Just give Zion the ball. I think he missed a free throw, though. So, I mean, just give him the ball and give him a chance to go. So maybe that one's not the best example. I'm pretty sure he missed a free throw that allowed UCF to come down and get the game set up. Maybe he's not good at free throws. But I will say, Cassius Winston from Michigan State, Big Ten Player of the Year, he's an alpha dog, and I don't know if any other team left in the tournament has a guy that can match him. If you go back to like Kemba Walker, guys like that, Villanova had a guy last year go off. You need to have an alpha dog that's not afraid. I mean, Winston hit a couple threes. He drove in so much that they had got a guy wide open to take the lead late because you had to pay respect to him. And I think that's where you really get into. Now, unfortunately for them, Texas Tech is the number one defensive team. And then Virginia is right up there too. So you potentially could have to go through two tough defenses to try to get it done. The only other tough defensive team they played, Michigan, they beat 3 times though. So when you have an alpha guy that can get defenses out of their tendency, I feel like he could really take over. And I hate to say it, but I'm really feeling like this could be Michigan State's year. Do I want to see them win? No. But it has the feel to me that Winston's going to just get it done. I watched him get it done all year. And normally when a guy has that drive, he gets it done. I mean, it's going to come down to other teams. Virginia, this is your chance. You haven't won a national championship. You had Ralph Sampson in the 80s. You lost to Houston. You let Jim Valvano win a national championship. When you were the clear better team that year, I believe, all season long, couldn't get it done. Your known chokers almost on Purdue's level. Last year, you lost to a 16 seed. There's no better redemption story than Virginia battling back and winning the national championship. But they have to get it done against Auburn. And Auburn, man, just for Charles Barkley's antics during the game, where he has his desk set up and all of his Auburn gear, I love it. I love the trash talking aspect. So it'll be good to see if they go any further. Because 2 first-time champions battling out, let's say Texas Tech beats Michigan State, and they're playing like Auburn or Virginia, it's going to be amped up. So I'm excited this year. Michigan couldn't get a shot in their Sweet 16s, as I know some people are waiting to hear me give my thoughts on that. And that's their kryptonite. Same thing I said last year. They don't really have a guy like Winston that could take over and hit buckets consistently. I think they only shot like 30% from 3 this year, which in college is pretty bad. If you get to 30 wins shooting that, you're relying on your defense. But if you're playing another defensive team, that game was boring as hell to watch. Not going to lie. It was like 6-4 for the longest time. I think it was like 15 minutes left in the first, and then it was like, 24-16 at halftime or something crazy. When the teams are like combined for 40 points, it's a bad game. You can't tell me that game was fun to watch. We could get that with Virginia and Texas Tech, though. But, Matt, what were your thoughts on Florida State?
I thought it was just a frustrating game. I wanted to see that I felt like they weren't boxing out. They weren't getting the rebounds that they needed. It was like they would get shots, but then everyone would just watch and allow them to get the rebound and take it to the other end. And it was like the longer that the game wore on, the more I kind of had that sinking feeling that Gonzaga was going to pull away with it. And even by the time I had sent the text to you, it was too late. They were already missing too many shots, and they kind of put themselves in that situation where we need to start being more aggressive. And they weren't knocking the shots down. They were getting open 3-pointers and just were bricking them, where I felt like they had some success in the earlier part of the game playing underneath. They just remind me of a team, and they had the talent, but they just didn't have that composure late in games to go to the next level. And I think like when you see the teams, like when I watch Duke, you don't see them panic because they've been in that situation so many times where that confidence just goes from the program. And I'm sure it starts with Coach K being in that situation a lot and coaching himself out of those things, that you don't see the players panic. And I think a lot of times Florida State this year, the games I've watched, they've panicked. And it's like they force bad turnovers and they have bad plays that end up costing them games.
Yeah, to piggyback off your coaching thing, I know I always give Purdue a hard time and Matt Painter for choking, but he did a great job of putting his guys in position. And if they would have made free throws, they would have beat Purdue. They would have beat Virginia, I mean. They battled back to beat Tennessee, and I thought Tennessee had that game won. Then Purdue blew it at the end with free throws, let it get into overtime, and they somehow controlled that to win. If they make free throws in either game, they win. You got to make your free throws. I felt bad for them because Matt Painter's been close. The Big Ten, just from following the Big Ten, they were close to having 2 teams in the Final Four. And when you miss free throws down the stretch, has to be brutal. And then the other big game that I had in my notes was the Gonzaga game in the West Regional Final, just because Florida State, Michigan were in that one. I was keeping an eye on that one. Texas Tech and Gonzaga. Texas Tech blocks a shot. The guy steps out of bounds, catches it, and throws it in. They call a foul. The ref didn't see that he stepped out of bounds, and the NCAA came back and said, not a reviewable call. I know there were some fouls at the end that made the game seem like it wasn't as close, but that should have been Gonzaga's ball, and I think it was like a 1 or 2 possession game at that point. So that game could have swung Gonzaga's way. I don't understand how. How do you have a call that's not reviewable? Like if I was this is why people talk about gambling getting legal. Like, give me a break. How you're going to have some upset bookies, man, if the favorite, Gonzaga, you're going to have some guys going after some bookies just because the NCAA had a rule that you couldn't review it. If you have TV angles, you already waste so much time adding like 6/10 of a second back, or like some of the other stupid reviews. It's like a 20-point game in the NCAA tournament, and the ref's looking over there to see if you can give the other team a second back. Like, who gives a shit about that? This is a regional final. He stepped out of bounds. It's not that hard. It changes possession. It should be reviewable. I don't understand. Did you see that, Matt?
Which part?
It was the Gonzaga Texas Tech game. The guy.
No, I missed that.
Texas Tech, he blocked a shot, but he stepped out of bounds. And the ref on the floor didn't see it. But the ball should have stayed with Gonzaga. And
yeah, I remember seeing the highlight of it, but those are the kind of plays that the easy reversible calls should be ones that they can overturn on the floor.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, and I agree 100%. If it's not a foul, I understand where they're coming from. If it's a foul and they're like, well, we can't overturn like a charge or something like that. But now they were in talks of doing that anyway. Same with the NFL overturning pass interference. Why would you ever get yourself into that situation when there are so many other more obvious calls that you're fighting with these replays? It's dumb. Like, it's frustrating to watch, and you watch a game like that, and you can't help feeling that it's rigged. Because who in their right mind would sit there and say, oh, guy stepping out of bounds, we don't need to review that. That's clear cut. Like some brass sat up there in the office and said, yeah, let's not put that on the reviewable list. Like, someone had to do that. They had to think stepping out of bounds would be reviewable. But whatever. We'll see. Got a bunch of games, but we got some other basketball topics to get into here. UNC women's basketball. Breaking news today that they have an investigation going on for their head coach. Now, granted, this is Hall of Fame coach Sylvia Hassel. I think that's Hatchell, maybe. She was around all the way back in 1994. I think she won a national championship that year. Guess what else started back in the 90s, back around that time? The UNC cheating fake course scandal. So they go through the whole fake cheating, fake courses, which was real. It was proven. Any UNC fans can argue against it, but they went on academic probation. They're honestly, I think, the only major school that's ever been on academic probation. So I don't see how they can still be ranked high for academic integrity in like the U.S. News and Report, because you can just go down the list and say, oh, they're ahead of Auburn. Was Auburn ever on academic probation? No, I don't think so. So you can't really tell me the UNC education's that much better. But you're looking at it, and they let it go. Whatever, they kind of brushed it under the rug, said that they didn't know. But now players are starting to come out against her again. And it's making me think that, did it stop at all? Are there still some shady things going on in that program? Because they didn't give a lot of information, but they did say that it's a player-driven issue. And I'd like to hear your thoughts, Matt, before I get into my speculation. So go ahead.
I don't even know what to make of it. It just, the timing seems bad. I don't know what at this point they could really do to make, or what's making this a big issue all of a sudden. Because there's so much that's kind of under wraps. It's just the entire staff, which makes me think that there has to be something bigger university in play, whether it be something with the does it go back to the grade scandal? I don't know. It's just a really bizarre situation, and for as much as it's breaking, I'm surprised that there's not more information out already.
Well, the reason I'll point back to the grade scandal is, if you think about it, if it's player-driven revolt, there's only like two things that it could be. Like, either you're not getting what you were promised, I guess maybe three or four things, but like, you're not getting your playing time promised. Okay, the whole team's not going to be on board with that because they want to win. So you can scrap that one. Maybe you get a player transfer here or there complaining about the coach, but you're not going to get the entire team. On the other hand, you have abuse, sort of to what DJ Durkin had at Maryland. That can get the players to band together. But even his abuse, they couldn't get all the players on the same page. They couldn't get all the players on the same page against him and his, abrasive practices that ultimately ended in the death of a player. So honestly, if it came out to be that, I wouldn't be shocked. But she's been coaching for, 30, 40 years now? So you would think that this wouldn't be the first time, especially since cell phones have been around. If they had anything like this on her back in the scandal day, they would have dropped her then. So I wonder if it's coming back to the fake grades thing. Because to me, that's the only other thing that could get the players to band together. You're forced to bring in, if we're laying out the facts, if you're a male athlete, basketball player, this doesn't affect you as much, because if you're promised to go to UNC, you know you have a shot at going pro. Okay? So you know that if you don't end up on an NBA roster, there's a good chance you end up in the G League. And there's a good chance you get offered a six-figure salary to pay overseas. If you're a woman coming in, you don't have that dream. Because WNBA only has a limited number of teams and a limited number of spots, and they don't pay. They don't pay a great salary. So you're promised what? Your degree. So if you come in thinking like, hey, you're pitched all this great UNC academic, hey, you can be a dentist. And then once you get on the basketball program and they're like, yeah, that's not for us. You got to have to change the degrees. Like, that's the only thing to me, other than abuse of a coach, like, they would be internal enough to get all of the players together. The fourth thing that I had in mind would be sexual stuff. Like, there are rumors like coaches intermingling with athletes and things like that, like Bobby Petrino. I guess that wasn't really athletes, but athletic facility like he had when he was at Arkansas. And he got fired for that with the women's volleyball coach, I believe. and they only found that out because he wrecked his scooter or his motorcycle. So those are the 4 things that came to mind for me. But go ahead, Matt. I know I interrupted you.
The history of that motorcycle crash. So kudos to you for bringing that up.
Is it for real?
Yeah,
Matt, I'm just surprised that you even know that. Why would you know that Bug Petrino's motorcycle accident's coming up?
Because I saw it on Twitter, the same place I find the majority of my news. When you follow enough obscure people, they will give you the information you need for your day.
I must have subconsciously known.
With what you were speculating as far as the grade stuff, it got me thinking. One of the things that I was really considering with this is, are they going to go back and slam the women's basketball coach for the wrongdoings of the men's basketball program? And so, because there have been no slaps, it's been less than a slap on the wrist for all of their academic scandal stuff, and it's just kind of been swept under the rug where they're just like, no, we're not going to do anything about it. Are they now going to turn this where they can show, the university can show, oh, we're being really tough. Look at this investigation we're doing. All of the coaching staff is on leave. Everyone's going to be, stepping down, because there's that time period where she's been there long enough that like it's a successful program that she can step away. They can hire someone out. It could be a political move too to try to push her out the door.
Yeah, and like I said, the first time, why do this now? Like, if it's going to be the same exact thing, why not just do it? When was that other scandal? Like, that other scandal drug on for years. So you have a Hall of Fame coach. If you knew it was still going on, have her step down like 2 years ago.
No, but part of it is they may not have had the bigger and better deal. You don't want to try to push a good coach out unless you know that you have something waiting. Otherwise, you end up with, who was it, UCLA, that's stuck now scrambling trying to find a coach.
Yeah, it's next on our docket, I think. Yeah. So I mean, if you push him out, are they really a great coach? If their only national championship came in 1994, it's very Joe Paterno-esque. They pushed him out from a scandal because he was having mediocre seasons. It's not like UNC was in the Final Four, that to my knowledge, at least recently. They weren't one of the big programs. You had UConn, Baylor. Who else has been up there? Notre Dame won a national championship or two. So you have recent programs. It's not been UNC in that top upper echelon. So why? It just doesn't make sense. So I don't know if it's going to be widespread, and if it comes out that it's tutors again and fake classes, what do you really do there? Because then they have to investigate the entire athletic department, I would think. So it's really, really fishy. So this is something that it came out yesterday or today. So we're going to be following this closely. And just because it's right in the heart of the ACC, right on the heels of, I started to get ACC network ads, Matt. And you know what disappointed me the most? They're all tied to cable subscriptions. It was like, hey, you can get ACC Network if you have Hulu TV, or if you pay for YouTube TV, or if you pay for PlayStation View, or whatever the other ones that I don't even know.
Well, you
Sling
knew
TV.
You weren't going to get that for free, dog. You knew you weren't. You got to
Put it in ESPN Plus.
No, they would never do that.
That's how they make new fans, man. If you think about it, if you have to pay for that, now you get ACC. Guess what other ones you get? You also get the SEC network and the Big Ten network and whatever other ones are already established. And
don't you go talking common sense on this show. Don't you go making sense.
ESPN Plus has nothing. Put it in there. You're much more. And if ESPN really wanted to do it right, they put it on there, and they start to put some of their bigger shows on there, like Pardon the Interruption. I don't even know what other shows are. That one with Stephen A. Smith, something like that. So you start to put those on ESPN Plus so that you can watch on demand. So like if you miss it at 11 o'clock, it's on there. And maybe it's on there now. I don't know. Whenever I sign in to watch ESPN, it always just has it at the bottom, and it's always like the weirdest games. Put it on there. I think most people would be more willing to pay the $5 then for your ESPN Plus, but also include it in the other ones too. Like put it in both. Why just put it in one? It feels like you're a decade late to the party at that, if you're just doing that. But we'll see. We'll see if it helps some of those Some of those schools in the ACC make up money. We didn't even talk about the NCAA tournament money. I skipped all over it. The payouts for the NCAA tournament were finalized. The Big Ten, with their 8 seeds, came out ahead of all of the other conferences. They made, what was it, $35.5 million. And that conference, and I think most of these conferences split their money evenly. So the ACC is in second with $33.8 million. When it gets down to per team, they might make less than the third conference, SEC, because they have 15 members compared to 14. SEC made 32.1. I don't know if you do the math, if they're going to be really close at 2 and 3. The Big 12 then at 22 million, but again, they have less members, so that's not going to be as big of a drop as what you thought. But the big killer, and this gets into our next one, Pac-12, $11.8 million. They made a third of what like the SEC made in third place. So, ouch. And you mentioned it, UCLA, they're failing their coaching search. Their network's failing. They're not succeeding on the field. So how are they going to attract top talent? Do you know who they went after today? Jamie Dixon, who a lot of listeners, Pitt fans, are going to recognize that name because he coached Pitt to, were they ranked number 1? I know they were a number 1 seed.
They were close. They were close.
If they weren't, they were close when they were in the Big East. So I think they were a number 1 seed. I think they got to the Elite 8. I don't think he made a Final Four there. And he has what they say is a stumbling block, a $8 million buyout at TCU. So the rumors are right now, the UCLA doesn't know, they don't have that money in the athletic department. If they can't get a booster to pay that, and I don't know if they can. I mean, I would imagine most schools could. UCLA, they're top 5 all-time in basketball. I think they have the most national championships still. They have some of the most wins. One of the easiest places to recruit to because you're in California and you can have your pick of talent because none of the other Pac-12 programs come close to matching your success. They're basically like Duke or North Carolina if the other one didn't exist. And you can just take your pick of whatever player on the West Coast that you want. And now they can't find a coach. It's shocking. But I wanted to see your thoughts on that because to me, the Pac-12, they were one of the solid 4 conferences when you talked football. Does this hurt them going forward, and what do you think they can do about it?
I'm not sure how much it hurts them. I know as far as bringing Jamie Dixon over, I think that would be a great move for UCLA. I think if they're serious about turning it back into what once was a really powerful basketball program, I think that would be a step in the right direction. Whether they have the ability to pay that off is to be determined. I'm sure they put a lot of money into buying out Chip Kelly or trying to bring him over, so I'm sure they have a lot of extra money tied into football right now.
And I think that was due to their apparel deal. Was it Adidas or did they sign with Under Armour? Like they got a ridiculous, like they are the highest paid apparel deal, and I think that's how they got Chip Kelly. So if you're able to do that in one sport, it doesn't help both sports. But go ahead.
But I think football always draws more money, so for the most part, I think it's tougher to. You want to try to feed the machine. You brought up earlier about with Auburn and with Florida State how the football program has helped drive some of the success with the basketball program. UCLA doesn't really have a whole lot to hang their hat on. They've been inconsistent with their football program and to a lesser extent basketball. So I think if they're going to put all their eggs in one basket, they're better off going the football route and trying to build that back up and being competitive in the Pac-12 with football and potentially having that chance to piggyback off of that.
That's exactly what they're doing. And the only thing that scares me, and I'm not a UCLA fan by any means, but when they got Steve Alford, he was doing the same thing at Iowa that Jamie Dixon did at Pitt. He was getting high seeds in the NCAA tournament and choking. I think one time Iowa was like a 3 seed. They lost to 14 seed Northeastern or something like that. I remember that vividly back in the day. So he was able to recruit at a lesser program and have a top team. So they thought, oh, coming to UCLA. I think he actually left Iowa and went to like New Mexico or somewhere first before he ended at UCLA. So they thought that if he could have success at these lesser programs, he would be a shoo-in to succeed at UCLA. Didn't happen. Jamie Dixon is like the mirror of that. Success at Pitt, goes to a smaller school, TCU, that doesn't have a rich history of basketball, is doing pretty good there. And they try to poach him for what, a repeat of the Alford years? It doesn't move the needle. I heard that they had also thrown out Shaka Smart. He's even worse. He's overhyped and he hasn't done anything. Like and their VCU teams were highly ranked, but I can't remember. Maybe they got to a Final Four. I know they got run out of the building the one year against Michigan. So you have him at Texas bringing in top recruits. He had Mo Bamba, and he didn't do anything. So UCLA, man, it's got to be tough. And you don't even know with the sanctions and stuff coming out with the FBI trial. There's still rumors. I mean, we talked about it last week, the Nike allegations and stuff like that. A lot of those allegations that the lawyer made that said that he had information on Nike and the Department of Justice was looking into, he followed up and started to put some of his facts out. And a lot of the players that he named that he could link to Nike were West Coast players. I don't remember seeing any of them signing with UCLA. I think a lot of them were like USC or Arizona, which were teams that we already knew were involved. So it might have been old information, but still, you never know. But it's going to be...
I think the tough sell with the Pac-12, though, is how strong Oregon has because of the Nike amount of just apparel that they're able to produce. Because I think that draws in so many recruits and kind of isolates that whole West Coast right now with their ability to not only pull athletes in, but also have the appeal of the variety of uniform options and apparel that they're able to get. I think that's kind of hurting some of those other schools out west right now.
Well, you still have it comes down to coaching. You have Peterson at Washington and Leach at Washington State. They're both doing great for programs that historically haven't been top notch. I guess Washington, you could say, have been. They have a national championship, I believe. You're looking at that, and then what do you do after that for the other schools? Oregon State's never really going to compete. At least it looks that way. Then who else? You have some of the other ones, Stanford making strides in football. But the Pac-12, I thought that was going to be one of the stronger conferences just based on geography and its history with the Rose Bowl game. Maybe that doesn't make any sense anymore. If you're the Big Ten brass and you're looking at these numbers, you have to really think, why are we still holding on to the past? And I know Michigan has deep history with the Rose Bowl. I know a lot of Big Ten teams do. But it's number one. It's negative for all the Big Ten teams. They're always at a disadvantage playing in California. It's almost like a home game for every Pac-12 team, every Rose Bowl. It's basically USC's home game when they make it. Why hold on to that history? Why not try to create something new with the ACC or the SEC, kind of what they do in the rest of their bowls? And let the cards fall where they may. I think that would be the death knell to the Pac-12. Because I think that's one of the big sports, other than their Olympic sports. But you can't tell me that if the Rose Bowl ended and Texas and the Big 12 were like, hey, USC and a couple other schools, UCLA, you want to join and make like a Pac-12 and we can go true East-West? They would jump at that, I would believe. Because you could cut a lot of dead weight that way, get Colorado back in the mix, and try to have like a Western conference right now instead of two conferences, Big 12 smaller as is. Everyone talks about them going to 4 conferences, so we'll see. Everyone thought the Big 12 was going to be the one in this situation, but they're not. So I don't even know what to say. So anything else you got on that?
Nope.
Got one more basketball topic for you, though. Speaking of UCLA, because he had ties with the Ball family, Big Baller Brand rolled out their All-American game. First one. Might be the last one.
Try to make that money for the collapse.
Now, Matt, I never talk about this guy, but if people have been listening to this for a while, Matt used to bring him up. I would say habitually for a while there, like a couple episodes in a row about a year ago. So, what are your thoughts on this? You're a big fan.
I think the cash cow's about to run dry. He milked the boys. He tried to spin off their success and build his brand. I give him some kudos for trying, but this is like those Boeings. He's just going to crash and burn here. I think his 15 minutes of fame are just about up.
Well, hold your horses, Matt, because that brand, I've been seeing a couple people wear the BBB shirt. Now, could they be wearing it ironically? Yes. Could he find other investors, though, that just were hobbyists in athletics? Also, yes. That's the whole Bagman scheme. So why not have like a third-rate league? Let's wait and see what the FBI thing does. Maybe he'll fold. I don't know. Maybe he stops producing shoes and trying to be that type of apparel brand. But maybe this All-American thing will stick. It's probably the last game, but you never know. I only know about it because Michigan, I think he's a signee, had like 30 points in the game, which I assume is good. And I assume it's up against good competition.
Hey, I scored 40 points against my kids on our Fisher Price hoop. Just because they're playing a bunch of bums doesn't mean that it makes you an All-American.
Matt, they had the owner of the BBB on ESPN. They wouldn't put him on what do they call it, the worldwide leader of sports, if he wasn't a great athlete. They said
they would put him on there just because he runs his mouth and gives them ratings that they're desperately in need of.
He could beat MJ one-on-one, I heard. I heard that from a source. Hey, don't knock it. I want to see more competition, so let's get some of these teams broken up. You just talked about Oregon having an in with Nike. What happens if Michigan has an in with Big Baller Brand? Let's see what happens with that. Maybe we could score some points against Texas Tech, Matt. I'm all for trying to see other schools be successful. But, we did have a comment today on the show. Someone wants to know if you had a challen during the show on the video.
No.
All right.
I could.
I will say that the video is a little bit messed up because for whatever reason, my video conversion program decided that they're not going to support 720p, which is what we try to do the show in, which is like the lowest form of high definition. And everything's 1080p now, so it's really blown up because I never got an alert or anything that they were dropping that support. So next week, we'll try to get that rebalanced for you guys. So you got some nice close-ups, though, if you want to see some chaws. Had some comments about the Pac-12 having too many schools in a big geographic area, which is true. They're in multiple time zones. And the other conference that is in that situation is the Big 12. So why not make an alliance with them and just have, like, I don't even know if you'd keep it called the Pacific Coast Conference. Maybe you do some type of merger with the Big 12, but make like a Western America Conference that might be generic. But if the Pac-12 brand isn't getting you money, do something. Get those big schools, be the first conference to go to 16 or above, and see what happens. It's the only way you're going to be able to compete, because if those schools aren't making the money, because is it 2025 the Longhorn Network's up? I believe so. So if the Longhorn Network, if that goes away, conferences are going to shift. So that's 6 years away now? It's 100% going to happen. If the Pac-12 keeps losing money, and pretty soon, wouldn't it be embarrassing if they started to make less than what the American Conference did with UCF? Like, where would they go from there? The other mailbag question that I had was, Matt, do you think the AAF teams will get picked up by the XFL?
Let's try that again.
Do you think the AAF teams that are cut today are going to get picked up by the XFL?
There's a possibility that some might. I think it just depends on the needs of the league. I'm hoping that the XFL, and looking at the kind of guys that they're putting in front office office and coaching spots, they seem to have more of a college wide open type feel to it. So I think you're going to see kind of the anti-NFL stance from the XFL, and I think it's going to be a better brand than what the AAF was trying to push out, which may lead to more viewership and the almighty dollar.
You said it earlier, they had some of the smaller markets in the South that don't have teams. So could they? Yes. Will they? I don't think, just based on the way the teams are set up. You have investors that own these teams from a different league. They would almost have to do a buyout, and then what do you do with the other teams and the other agreements? I would assume all their agreements are for 1 year tops. And if they already have a team in Tampa Bay, are they really going to buy a team in Orlando? I still thought that they should have just did regional pods by putting teams right next to each other. And I still think that if they're going to do 8, do Tampa and Orlando. Do New York and New Jersey. Do Pittsburgh, Cleveland. Do like Chicago, Indianapolis. I don't know how far away those two are. Do 2 teams in Texas, San Antonio and whatever's close to them, Dallas, Houston. And then do 2 California teams. And of course, that's way over 8 teams. But just do your pick of those. If you want in LA, do LA and San Diego. You want in Chicago, do Chicago and Indianapolis, or Chicago and is one of the Wisconsin cities closer. Do New York, New Jersey, and then do Tampa and Orlando. And then you have built-in rivalries in big states near big cities that might get fans interested. Because if everyone in the state that you're friends with are fans of the same team and the team isn't good, it's not going to get any fan passion. The NFL's built on fan passion. Baltimore, hate them. Cleveland, hate them. You feel kind of sad for them, but now that people are talking about them, you don't want that as a Pittsburgh fan. No way do we want the Browns being good. I mean, a lot of people hate Tom Brady. Hate him. XFL, they started with the names on the back of the jersey. They did that so that traditional people would hate them. I mean, let's be honest. They wanted that publicity, and they wanted everyone to have some type of reaction to the league. I don't know if they can do that this time with social media. They really need to stand out. You could have had regional rivalries, and then you could have expanded that way, like I said, with 2 other cities at a time that are close geographically and went to 12, 16. I honestly think if they're going to do minor league football, though, 16 teams is the sweet spot. Because if you try to get the NFL to buy in, you may be able to get them to go into a minor league if you have 1 AFC team and 1 NFC team run each team.
But that's the risk of doing that, though, is that's a lot of front office people, that's a lot of stadium people, that's a lot of other jobs. That's one of the things that we didn't talk about with the AAF canceling, is it's not just the players and coaches that are affected, it's all of those other types of jobs that people were working during that time period that are being affected by this too, and that's unfortunate that the accountants and the front office people and secretaries and different people that were banking on those jobs now are back to being unemployed.
And I think that's why they made a big deal about how they could keep it running by paying those employees, because I think they did it very small business. I think they had 3 designers for all 8 teams. Like, each team didn't have their own designer. Though each team didn't have their own website guy or whatever. They were all one with the league. So I think a lot of that was handled in the front office. If you split those duties, I mean, you could have NFL guys or NFL teams that kind of work together side by side. And like I said, you would have to do NFC, AFC, because you really wouldn't want like the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers running the same minor league team. But like, who's to say Pittsburgh isn't running a team with like who's a NFC team that really doesn't matter? Like, let's say the Seattle Seahawks. Like, potentially they could be in the Super Bowl, yes, but could they have all their practice squads on the same XFL team? Yeah. So I think if you halved it, 8's too low to get them to do that, though. Because then what? You're like in between. You don't have enough players for each team. It's just weird. And I don't think it would ever get to that point anyway, which is why the AAF failed. so far. We'll see if it comes back. But just bring some excitement. Bring another sports competition that is exciting, because March Madness was great for, 2 weeks? Now you're almost done. You don't have as many games to watch. You could have very easily led into, I think there's a Final Four games on Saturday. I think they start at I could be wrong, they're late in the afternoon, so it's like a 5 and 7 start, or maybe even later than that, 6 and 8. Why not have an XFL game on at noon and at 3:30, the traditional college football spots? Lead into that. Make it big. That's what I want to see happen, so that we can watch football year round. And that's my last thought. Do you got anything for the final bell?
Yeah, one of the things that I saw, kind of going back to something we joked about on the show previously, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Ring of Honor. And I don't...
Matt, do you have to do this? Tony Dungy waited a whole year to get back to us, but go ahead.
No, but I just looking at teams that celebrate people in their Ring of Honor. And former Florida State running back James Wilder Jr., who's having success up in the Canadian Football League, was tweeting at the Buccaneers and saying that his dad, James Wilder Sr., has the Tampa Bay Buccaneers record for rushing attempts, yards, most receptions, and was 7th all-time with points. And those are still records currently for the Bucs, and he's not in their Ring of Honor. How do you lead the team in many offensive categories and you don't have him in there? When it comes to some of that stuff, I just think it's kind of a joke. So I think you're almost better off not having that.
Matt, that was the whole point we were trying to make last year with Tony Dungy getting in before some of the players. Who are you celebrating with the Ring of Honor? Are you doing it for an honorary captain thing? Everyone already knows who the great players are from the team. If you're from an older generation, you know more players than the younger people do. That's just the way it works. So you have the Hall of Fame or the Ring of Honor to kind of showcase those. Steelers have numbers around the stadium. If you go into the stadium, you'll see them. I don't know if that's exactly a ring. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they don't have the same thing. Maybe they do. I don't see, to be honest, when that part of the game comes and you're at the stadium, I really don't care what they're doing. They always have someone down there that you're saluting, or someone that's telling a story, or you have little kids out in the field kicking a ball and trying to get a record. Doesn't matter. I get it for the Hall of Fame aspect, where you can walk into the stadium and they have gigantic statues, but you got to be consistent. But yeah, Bucks. I mean, come on, you're embarrassing yourself whenever you start the Ring of Honor, and then it's kind of a weird thing. I think they should have started with hey, here's 10 people the first year, 10 people the second year to get caught up. If you started in the 2000s and you start doing one player at a time, it's going to come under scrutiny. I mean, you can always cut it back once it's established, but do an all decade. Start the first year, what year did they start? 72? Or were they before that? Maybe after. But do the 70s, then do the 80s, 10 players from each of those, or 5 players, whatever you want to cut it at. Do the 90s, then the 2000s, and then start picking and choosing. And if you didn't make the cut the first time, you could be in this time. And then do 1 a year or 2 a year, whatever they're doing now. To be honest, that's what they should have done to get caught up. If you're starting late, do something to catch up. I mean, look how bad Major League Baseball is with leaving my man Barry Bonds out. So, anything else you got?
Nope.
I think that's it. You can go to southboundsports.com. Check out our stuff. We have a shop there. You can get shirts and other gear. I'm adding more and more stuff to that. We're now on Spotify, so tell your friends. I was getting some people up. Oh, I did have one more thing. I keep getting complaints about the March Madness pick'em, and I will say that, number one, it's probably 50% my fault, but 50% not my fault, because I opened the league up, but whenever I clicked on the link that I got in the email, it reopened last year's league, which was inactive. So when it opened it, it just let people see the records from last year. And of course, I filled out my bracket and it let me put it in that league. So I assumed that everyone got the email So I had someone send me a screenshot that they did never receive an email, even in the spam folder. So I apologize to that. Next year, I'll pay closer attention. So I didn't just snub the March Madness Southbound Sports bracket on ESPN.com for a reason. For whatever reason, it opened up last year's and not this year's. So I apologize. I'm going to sign off with that. Go to southboundsports.com to keep up with episodes. Tell your friends to subscribe. And thanks for listening. We will see you next week.